The Great Hall of the NIGMA Empire's central command station buzzed with the quiet efficiency that defined their civilization. Supreme Analyticus Zenth 9 examined the holographic display floating before his crystalline body. The message from the Galactic Council had arrived 3 cycles ago, and its content still puzzled his logical mind. Ambassador Kelran of the Viridian Confederacy stood nervously before the Supreme Analyticus. The amphibian diplomat's skin showed patches of stress-induced color changes as he delivered his urgent message. Supreme Analyticus, the Council has voted unanimously. The human territories must remain untouched. This is not a request, but a formal warning backed by every major civilization in the galaxy. Zenth 9's optical sensors focused on the ambassador with cold precision. Ambassador Kelran, your words make little sense. Our analysis shows that humanity possesses inferior technology, limited spacefaring capability, and primitive military doctrine. They have existed in galactic space for barely 300 rotations. What possible threat could such a young species pose to an empire that has conquered 16 star systems? The ambassador's gills fluttered with anxiety. You misunderstand the nature of the threat, Supreme Analyticus. It is not their current capability that concerns us. It is what they become when threatened. Elaborate, Zenth 9's voice carried the mathematical certainty that had made NIGMA the galaxy's premier analytical force. Kelran activated a small projection device. Images of devastated worlds appeared in the air between them. These are the remains of the Korthak hegemony. They made contact with humanity 50 years ago. The Korthak were a proud warrior race, technologically superior to humans in every measurable way. And yet they fell to human forces. Zenth 9's tone suggested this was impossible. No, Supreme Analyticus. They fell to something far worse. They fell to human creativity. Kelran changed the images. The Korthak attacked a human mining colony. Standard military doctrine suggested they would capture the facility within hours. Instead, the humans turned mining equipment into weapons, civilian shuttles into missiles, and the colony's power core into a tactical nuclear device. The Korthak found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow any known rules of warfare. Zenth 9 processed this information through his analytical matrices. Desperation tactics, primitive but understandable when facing superior force. That was just the beginning, Kelran continued. The human response was swift and total. They didn't just mobilize their military, they weaponized their entire civilization. Cargo ships became carriers. Research stations became weapons laboratories. Even their children contributed by solving tactical problems their military computers couldn't handle. The Supreme Analyticus remained unmoved. Emotional response leading to inefficient resource allocation. Our models predict such behavior would result in rapid collapse of their infrastructure. Kelran's skin shifted to deep purple, a sign of extreme distress among his species. Supreme Analyticus, with respect, your models are incomplete. The Korthak had similar models. They calculated that human resistance would last at most 6 months. Instead, the war lasted 3 years and ended with the complete extinction of Korthak civilization. Impossible. No species could maintain such inefficient military production for 3 years without economic collapse. The humans didn't just maintain it, they accelerated it. Kelran showed new images. Human industrial capacity increased by 400% during the war. Their innovation rate jumped to levels we've never seen. They developed technologies in months that should have taken decades. By the end of the war, human military capability exceeded Korthak peak performance by a factor of 7. Zenth 9's processors hummed as he analyzed this data. The numbers suggest either fabrication or fundamental misunderstanding of the events. I was there, Supreme Analyticus. I served as a neutral observer during the final battle at Korthak Prime. I watched human forces arrive in ships that hadn't existed 6 months earlier, using weapons that defied our understanding of physics, coordinated by battle plans that seemed to predict Korthak moves before they were made. Prediction suggests advanced computational analysis. Perhaps we underestimated their technological development. Kelran's expression grew grave. It wasn't computation, Supreme Analyticus. It was intuition. The humans seemed to understand their enemies better than the enemies understood themselves. They found weaknesses that didn't appear in any analysis, exploited blind spots that shouldn't have existed, and adapted to every Korthak counter-strategy within hours. The Supreme Analyticus remained silent for several moments, processing through millions of tactical scenarios. Even accepting your account as accurate, the NIGMA Empire is not the Korthak hegemony. Our analytical capabilities far exceed any warrior race. Our technology is centuries ahead of human development. Our strategic planning accounts for variables the Korthak never considered. That's exactly what the Zelthrani Republic said. Zenth 9's optical array focused sharply on the ambassador. The Zelthrani? When did they encounter humanity? 15 years after the Korthak War ended. The Zelthrani were convinced they could succeed where warriors had failed. They were master strategists, supreme analyticus. Their planning capabilities rivaled even NIGMA analytical power. They studied the Korthak War for 3 years before making contact. And their results? Kelrin's skin had now shifted to a pale gray, the color of deep fear. The war lasted 6 weeks. The humans had learned from fighting the Korthak. They didn't wait for the Zelthrani to attack. They didn't try to defend their territory. They went straight to Zelthrani space and began systematically dismantling their civilization from within. Elaborate on their tactics. There were no tactics, supreme analyticus, at least none that our strategic analysis could identify. The humans seemed to operate on principles that contradicted everything we understand about warfare, logistics, and physics. They turned Zelthrani strengths into weaknesses, made their careful plans work against them, and somehow convinced entire Zelthrani fleets to surrender without firing a shot. Zenth 9's processors worked furiously, trying to model behavior that seemed to defy logical analysis. Mind control technology? No evidence of such capability. The surrendering Zelthrani claimed they simply realized the futility of resistance. When interviewed, they couldn't explain their decision in rational terms. They just knew they couldn't win. Psychological warfare, then. Advanced manipulation techniques, perhaps. But if so, the humans developed and deployed such techniques with a speed that suggests either prepared capability or adaptation rates beyond our measurement tools. The Supreme Analyticus stood motionless for long minutes, his crystalline form reflecting the soft lights of the command center. Around them, NIGMA technicians continued their work with quiet efficiency, unaware that their leader was contemplating information that challenged the fundamental assumptions of their civilization. Ambassador Kelrin, what does the Council propose we do with this information? Leave them alone, Supreme Analyticus. Mark their space as protected territory and focus your expansion efforts elsewhere. The galaxy is vast. There are countless worlds that pose no such risks. And if our expansion brings us naturally into contact with human space, Kelrin's skin shifted through several colors before settling on deep blue, the shade of absolute certainty. Then warn them well in advance. Negotiate carefully and never under any circumstances. Give them reason to perceive NIGMA as a threat. Zenth 9 processed this recommendation through his strategic analysis systems. Every calculation suggested the same conclusion. The recommended course was inefficient, based on incomplete data and contrary to NIGMA expansion objectives. Ambassador Kelrin, the NIGMA Empire appreciates the Council's concern. However, our analysis suggests the threats you describe are either exaggerated or based on incomplete understanding of the tactical situations involved. We will proceed with standard expansion protocols. The ambassador's skin flashed bright red, the Viridian equivalent of alarm. Supreme Analyticus, please reconsider. I have seen what humans are capable of when they perceive a threat. Your analytical capabilities, however advanced, are not equipped to model their response patterns. Our analytical capabilities are the most advanced in known space, Ambassador. If we cannot model human behavior, then human behavior cannot be modeled. And if it cannot be modeled, it cannot be truly dangerous to a prepared force. Kelrin gathered his diplomatic materials with movements that spoke of defeat. Then I can only hope, Supreme Analyticus, that when you do encounter humanity, you will remember this conversation. As the ambassador departed, Zenth 9 returned his attention to the holographic displays showing NIGMA expansion routes. The most efficient path to valuable resource systems led directly through a region, marked on galactic charts as Terran, Federation Territory, Protected Zone. Logic dictated that protection zones were established for good reason. But logic also dictated that a civilization that had mastered interstellar travel, conquered multiple star systems, and perfected analytical warfare could handle any challenge posed by a primitive species with barely 3 centuries of spaceflight experience. The Supreme Analyticus began, composing orders for the third expansion fleet. The research vessel, Curiosity's Edge, drifted silently through the asteroid field at the border of Terran space. Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted the sensor array for the 15th time that day, trying to get cleaner readings on the unusual mineral formations the NIGMA Empire had been mining in the neighboring system. Sarah, you need to see this, her research partner, Dr. Marcus Webb, called from the navigation station. We've got multiple contacts approaching fast. Configuration suggests military vessels. Sarah moved to the main display and frowned at the sensor readings. That's a lot of ships for a routine patrol. Are they broadcasting any signals? Standard universal greeting protocol followed by, oh. Marcus's expression grew concerned. They're demanding immediate surrender and preparation for boarding. Boarding? Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. We're in Terran space conducting authorized research. They have no legal right to board us. Legal rights might not matter much if they're pointing weapons at us, Marcus observed, highlighting the tactical display. 15 ships, Sarah, heavy cruiser class. We've got emergency thrusters and a mining laser. Sarah studied the approaching fleet through the viewports. The NIGMA ships moved with mathematical precision, maintaining perfect formation as they closed distance. Their crystalline hulls reflected starlight in patterns that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Open a channel, she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the alien form of a NIGMA officer. Its crystalline body pulsed with soft blue light as it spoke in perfectly translated standard Terran. Terran vessel, you are trespassing in space claimed by the NIGMA Empire. You will shut down all systems and prepare for immediate boarding and interrogation. Sarah stepped forward, drawing on her diplomatic training. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, commanding the Terran research vessel Curiosity's Edge. We are conducting authorized scientific research in Terran Federation space, as established by the Galactic Territorial Accords. You have no authority here. The NIGMA officer's light shifted to amber. Terran space claims are not recognized by NIGMA authority. Your vessel contains sensor data regarding NIGMA operations. This constitutes espionage. We haven't crossed into your space. Our sensors can't even penetrate your security fields from this distance. Any data we've collected comes from passive observation of naturally occurring phenomena. Irrelevant. You will comply with boarding procedures or face destruction. Marcus whispered urgently. Sarah, we need to run. Now. But Sarah was studying the NIGMA formation, her scientist's mind automatically cataloging patterns and possibilities. They're keeping perfect spacing, she murmured. Look at their approach vector. Textbook encirclement. Probably from some manual they all memorized. That's great analysis, Sarah, but it doesn't help us escape 15 warships. Maybe it does. Sarah moved to the engineering console. Marcus, remember the Kobayashi Maru scenario from the Academy? The unwinnable tactical simulation? Sarah, this isn't a test scenario. Those are real weapons pointed at us. Exactly. And the solution to an unwinnable scenario is to change the rules. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls. They're approaching like this is a standard military engagement. But we're not a military vessel. The NIGMA officer's voice echoed through the comm system. Terran vessel, you have 30 seconds to comply before we open fire. Sarah, whatever you're planning now would be good. Hang on. Sarah triggered multiple systems simultaneously. The ship's mining laser powered up, not to fire at the approaching vessels but to target the largest asteroid in the field. Emergency thrusters fired in patterns that sent the ship into what appeared to be an uncontrolled spin. Most importantly, she activated the ship's emergency beacon, not the standard distress call, but the specific signal used by research vessels to indicate discovery of dangerous phenomena. What are you doing? Marcus demanded, grabbing onto a support rail as the ship lurched, making us unpredictable. Sarah continued her seemingly random commands. They're analyzing our behavior, trying to determine our capabilities and intentions. So I'm giving them behavior that doesn't fit any model. The mining laser struck the target asteroid, and the result was spectacular. The rock wasn't just destroyed, it exploded in a chain reaction that Sarah had calculated based on the unusual mineral readings she'd been studying. The entire asteroid field lit up as exotic particles cascaded through the debris. On the NIGMA command ship, alerts screamed through the bridge. Tactical Coordinator Vex 7 studied the readings with growing confusion. Subcommander, the human vessel has triggered an exotic particle cascade. The entire field is now saturated with energy readings that are interfering with our sensors. Subcommander Keth 3's crystalline form pulsed with analytical light. Explain their tactical purpose. Are they attempting to mask an escape? Unknown, Subcommander. Their current trajectory is erratic and appears to serve no logical purpose. They are spinning at a rate that should render their crew unconscious, yet they continue to broadcast on multiple frequencies. What are they broadcasting? Scientific data, Subcommander. Detailed analysis of the particle cascade they just triggered. They appear to be excited about their discovery. Keth 3 processed this information through multiple tactical algorithms. None produced satisfactory results. Are they requesting surrender terms? No, Subcommander. They are requesting that we move our vessels to a safe distance to avoid contamination from the exotic particles. They are warning us about a phenomenon they created? Affirmative. According to their broadcasts, the particles could cause crystalline structural damage to our hull plating. On the Curiosity's edge, Sarah was indeed excited, though not entirely for scientific reasons. Marcus, look at their formation. They're pulling back. Because you warned them about particle contamination? Because I gave them data they can't ignore. Sarah highlighted the sensor readings on her screen. These particles really could damage their hulls. But more importantly, I've created a situation their tactical computers can't analyze. Am I running? Am I attacking? Am I conducting research? All three actions support the same behavior pattern. The NIGMA ships had indeed pulled back, but they maintained their encirclement at a greater distance. Subcommander Keith 3 was experiencing something his species rarely encountered: uncertainty. Tactical Coordinator, what is the human vessel's current status? Still spinning, still broadcasting scientific data, still warning us about contamination risks. Subcommander, our analytical systems cannot determine their intentions. Then we board them and extract the information directly, signal the assault craft. But Sarah wasn't finished. As NIGMA boarding craft launched from the main vessels, she initiated the next phase of her improvised plan. The ship's cargo bay doors opened, ejecting a cloud of research equipment, sample containers and emergency supplies. Sarah, we just dumped half our gear into space. Trust me. Sarah was now broadcasting on multiple emergency frequencies simultaneously. Mayday, Mayday. This is research vessel Curiosity's Edge. We are experiencing catastrophic systems failure due to exotic particle exposure. Our hull is compromised and we are venting atmosphere. Any vessels in the area? Please maintain safe distance and assist with evacuation if possible. The NIGMA boarding craft found themselves navigating through a field of debris that made their approach dangerous and unpredictable. Worse, their sensors showed the human ship was indeed venting atmosphere and appeared to be breaking apart. Subcommander Vex 7 reported, the human vessel appears to be in genuine distress. Their hull is showing multiple fractures and they are losing life support. Then we board them quickly before they are destroyed. Subcommander, Galactic Maritime Law requires us to render assistance to vessels in distress. Keth 3's analytical systems struggled with this development. Maritime law was clear, but so were their orders to capture the human vessel. The law had been written, assuming ships in distress were not also potential enemy vessels, engaging in unknown tactical maneuvers. The first NIGMA boarding party reached the Curiosity's Edge as Sarah initiated the final phase of her plan. The ship's emergency systems had indeed detected hull breaches, because Sarah had triggered controlled decompression in non-essential sections. The research vessel was genuinely in distress, even though Sarah had caused that distress intentionally. As the NIGMA soldiers breached the airlock, they found Dr. Chen and Dr. Webb in emergency suits, frantically working to contain what appeared to be a cascading systems failure. Sarah looked up as the crystalline beings entered her ship. Thank goodness. Are you here to help with evacuation? The particle exposure has destabilized our main reactor, and we have maybe 10 minutes before total containment failure. The lead NIGMA soldier processed this statement through his mission parameters. They were here to capture enemies, but the enemies were requesting rescue assistance. Standard NIGMA doctrine had no protocols for this scenario. You are prisoners of the NIGMA Empire, the soldier stated, following the closest applicable procedure. That's fine, Sarah replied, continuing to work at her console. But can we discuss custody arrangements after we prevent this reactor from exploding? Because if it goes critical, it'll take out everything within a 5-kilometer radius, including your boarding craft. The NIGMA soldiers' analytical systems immediately confirmed the threat was real. The human ship's reactor Supreme Analyticus Zenth 9 studied the reports from the Curiosity's Edge encounter with increasing frustration. 3 cycles had passed since Subcommander Keith III's forces had made contact with the human research vessel, and the tactical analysis computers still could not provide a satisfactory assessment of human capabilities. The data is inconsistent, reported Chief Analyst Kex 5. The humans demonstrated advanced tactical thinking by creating the particle cascade, yet they also appeared genuinely surprised by some of its effects. They showed sophisticated understanding of our technology, but also relied on improvisation in ways that suggest incomplete preparation. Improvisation should not be effective against superior analytical planning, Zenth 9 replied. Yet they achieved their apparent objectives while our forces failed to achieve theirs. Perhaps Supreme Analyticus. Their objectives were different from what we assumed. Zenth 9's optical array focused sharply on the analyst. Explain. We assumed they sought to escape capture. But analysis of their actions suggests their primary goal was intelligence gathering. Every maneuver they performed gave them data about our capabilities, our decision-making processes, and our technological limitations. Impossible. They were a research vessel, not a military intelligence operation. The distinction may not be relevant to human thinking, Supreme Analyticus. Their researchers appear to treat all unknown phenomena, including enemy contact, as subjects for scientific study. This observation troubled Zenth 9 more than he cared to admit. NIGMA civilization was built on the principle that superior analysis led to superior outcomes. If humans could gather meaningful intelligence while appearing to be victims, it suggested analytical capabilities that defied measurement. Recommend immediate action, he ordered. Direct military engagement with a human settlement. We require data on human combat capabilities under controlled conditions. Zenth 9 processed this recommendation through multiple strategic algorithms. A military engagement would provide clear data about human defensive capabilities, while also demonstrating NIGMA superiority to any observers. The analytical models predicted rapid victory with minimal losses. Select target, New Harmony Colony in the Kepler 4A42 system. Population approximately 50,000, primarily agricultural and mining operations, minimal defensive installations. The colony represents typical human frontier development. Deploy the 7th Assault Fleet, standard pacification protocols. The 7th Assault Fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 36 fighter craft, and 4 troop transports carrying a full battalion of NIGMA ground forces. Admiral Hex II commanded the fleet with the same mathematical precision that had conquered the Althari, resistance and pacified the Zephyrian rebellion. New Harmony Colony detected the approaching fleet 2 days before arrival. The response was immediate and, from NIGMA perspective, puzzling. Instead of preparing defensive positions or attempting to evacuate, the colonists began what appeared to be a massive construction project. Mining equipment disappeared underground. Agricultural machinery was dismantled and reassembled into unrecognizable configurations. Even children's playground equipment was gathered and modified for unknown purposes. Admiral, reported Tactical Specialist Jex 8, the humans are not fortifying their settlement. They appear to be dismantling it. Admiral Hex II reviewed the surveillance data, explained their strategic purpose. Unknown, Admiral. Our analysis systems cannot determine the tactical value of their current activities. Perhaps they are attempting to hide valuable resources before our arrival. Negative, Admiral. They are broadcasting their activities on multiple frequencies. They want us to observe their preparations. This was another example of behavior that defied NIGMA understanding. Enemies should attempt to conceal their defensive preparations, not advertise them. Either the humans were so primitive they didn't understand basic tactical doctrine, or they were operating according to principles NIGMA analysts couldn't recognize. The fleet arrived at New Harmony to find the colony transformed. The neat grid of buildings and streets had been replaced by what appeared to be a 3-dimensional maze of tunnels, bridges, and interconnected structures that seemed to follow no logical architectural pattern. Admiral, the colony layout makes no tactical sense. There are no clear defensive positions, no obvious command structures, and no apparent military installations. Perhaps they have evacuated the civilian population and left the settlement empty. Negative, Admiral. We're detecting full population levels, but distributed throughout the modified structures in patterns that appear random. Admiral Hex II ordered the standard preliminary bombardment. 6 targets were selected according to NIGMA doctrine: power generation, communications, transportation hubs, administrative centers, supply depots, and defensive installations. The bombardment achieved precisely nothing. The power generation facility turned out to be a decoy containing nothing but scrap metal and holographic projectors. The communications center was also empty, though it continued broadcasting on all frequencies. The transportation hub had been converted into what appeared to be a massive kinetic energy storage system that used the bombardment energy to power unknown mechanisms throughout the colony. Most disturbing of all, the administrative center exploded when struck, but the explosion was clearly controlled and directed. Instead of destroying the building, it triggered a cascade of controlled detonations that reconfigured the entire colony layout in real time. Admiral, the human settlement just rearranged itself. Explain. The bombardment triggered pre-positioned charges that moved entire sections of the colony to new locations. The current layout bears no resemblance to the previous configuration. Admiral Hex II authorized a second bombardment, targeting the new configuration. This time, the results were even more bewildering. Several of the buildings turned out to be mobile, using concealed tracks to relocate during the attack. Others contained sophisticated holographic systems that made them appear to be hit when they weren't, or appear to be intact when they had actually been destroyed. By the end of the second bombardment, the NIGMA tactical computers had completely lost track of the colony's actual layout. Admiral, request permission to begin ground assault. Granted. Deploy all troops according to standard urban pacification doctrine. The NIGMA ground forces descended toward New Harmony, expecting to face demoralized civilians hiding in damaged buildings. Instead, they found themselves entering a three-dimensional puzzle designed by minds that seemed to think in ways NIGMA analysts couldn't predict. Captain Lex 4 led the first assault team toward what appeared to be the colony's central district. His squad moved with practiced efficiency, clearing buildings according to established protocols. The first building they entered contained a single human child, approximately 8 years old, sitting at a desk and working on what appeared to be mathematical equations. Human juvenile, you are now under NIGMA authority. Where are the adult humans? The child looked up with bright, curious eyes. Are you here for the math competition? I've been working on this really cool problem about multidimensional kinetic energy transfer. Captain Lex 4's analytical systems struggled to process this response. What is your location's strategic significance? Oh, this building isn't strategically significant at all. That's why I'm here. The important stuff is happening underground. Would you like to see my equation? It's about using small inputs to create large outputs through cascade amplification. Before the captain could respond, the child pressed a button on her desk. The floor beneath the NIGMA squad collapsed, dropping them into a tunnel system that immediately began moving. The walls were equipped with rollers that carried the soldiers along predetermined paths, while automated systems sprayed them with some kind of foam that hardened around their legs. Sorry about the foam, the child's voice echoed through speakers in the tunnel. It's not permanent, but it should hold you for about an hour. Don't worry, we've got snacks and water stations every 50 meters. Captain Lex 4 found himself being transported through a tunnel system that defied every principle of military engineering he knew. Instead of straight passages designed for efficient movement, the tunnels curved and looped in patterns that seemed designed to disorient intruders while providing multiple escape routes for defenders. Meanwhile, other NIGMA squads were discovering that the colony's defensive strategy consisted entirely of elements that shouldn't have been militarily useful. Farming equipment had been converted into kinetic projectile launchers that fired potatoes with enough force to crack NIGMA armor. Children's toys had been weaponized into sophisticated electronic warfare devices that interfered with NIGMA communications. Even the colony's decorative fountains had been rigged to spray a mixture of water and conductive particles that disrupted NIGMA energy weapons. Squad leader. Nex 7 found himself trapped in what had once been the colony's library. The humans had somehow turned the building's books into a physical maze, with passages that led through carefully constructed book tunnels to rooms that couldn't possibly exist within the building's original footprint. Control. I am encountering SPAT. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the Terran Federation's primary military station, watching data streams that would have seemed impossible just 72 hours earlier. The attack on New Harmony had triggered something in human civilization that she had never seen before, and frankly wasn't sure she wanted to see again. Admiral, the conversion statistics are still climbing, reported Commander James Park, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and concern. We're showing over 94% of civilian space-capable vessels have volunteered for military conversion. Even private yachts and research shuttles are requesting weapons packages. What about industrial capacity? That's the really unprecedented part. Industrial output has increased by 320% in the last 72 hours. Factories that were producing civilian goods on Monday are turning out military hardware by Wednesday. We're seeing innovation cycles that normally take months happening in days. Admiral Vasquez studied the tactical displays showing human space. Every system, every station, every settlement was contributing to the war effort in ways that defied standard military logistics theory. Mining operations were producing rare metals for weapon systems. Agricultural colonies were manufacturing chemical compounds for ship fuel. Even pleasure resorts had converted their entertainment facilities into training centers for rapid deployment troops. Commander, what's the psychological evaluation on this mobilization rate? The analysis teams are calling it productive hysteria, Admiral. The attack on New Harmony wasn't seen as just an assault on a single colony. The entire population seems to have interpreted it as an existential threat to human civilization. Is that interpretation accurate? Commander Park hesitated. According to the intelligence reports from Dr. Chen's encounter and the New Harmony incident, the NIGMA Empire appears to be conducting experimental attacks to test our capabilities. Their fleet deployments suggest they're building toward a larger offensive operation, so the hysteria might be justified. That's what concerns the psychological assessment team, Admiral. When human mass mobilization is justified, historical precedent suggests the response tends to be comprehensive. Admiral Vasquez knew what he meant. Human history was filled with examples of civilizations that had made the mistake of threatening humanity's survival. None of those civilizations still existed. Show me the fleet composition. The main display shifted to show the gathering human armada. What she saw challenged every assumption about military logistics she had learned in 30 years of service. Admiral, we're showing over 15,000 vessels assembled, or assembling in the primary staging areas. But here's the unusual part. Less than 30% are traditional military ships. Explain the rest. Converted cargo haulers equipped with kinetic projectile systems. Research vessels carrying experimental weapons. Passenger liners modified for troop transport and electronic warfare. Mining ships retrofitted with industrial-grade cutting lasers. We even have luxury cruise ships that have been turned into mobile command centers. How is this conversion happening so quickly? That's where it gets really interesting, Admiral. The modifications aren't being done by military contractors. Civilian engineers, garage mechanics, even hobbyists are contributing designs and modifications. We're getting weapons innovations from teenagers and tactical suggestions from retired school teachers. Admiral Vasquez examined detailed reports of the conversion process. A cargo vessel called Murphy's Law had been converted into a kinetic bombardment platform by a team of dock workers who had never seen military service. Their solution involved using the ship's original cargo, handling systems to launch containers, filled with dense materials at near relativistic speeds more. Remarkable was the cruise ship Endless Summer, which had been turned into a mobile electronic warfare platform by a combination of professional engineers and amateur radio enthusiasts. Their approach to signal jamming involved techniques that military science had never considered because they were based on entertainment technology rather than weapons development. Commander, what's the estimated timeline for full deployment? This is going to sound impossible, Admiral, but current projections suggest the fleet will be ready for offensive operations within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Standard mobilization protocols require at least 6 months for a deployment of this size. Yes, Admiral, but standard protocols assume military logistics and traditional command structures. What we're seeing is more like a crowdsourced war effort. Every decision is being made by whoever is closest to the problem, using whatever resources are immediately available. Admiral Vasquez reviewed reports from across human space. On Luna Base, weapons researchers had developed new missile guidance systems by combining military targeting technology with civilian gaming software. The result was guidance systems that could adapt to enemy countermeasures by treating combat like a real-time strategy game. On Mars, terraforming engineers had created atmospheric processors that could be weaponized to make enemy-held worlds uninhabitable. Their approach was to treat planetary warfare like an environmental engineering problem, rather than a military one. Most impressively, the asteroid mining operations in the belt had developed kinetic bombardment systems that could deliver planet-killing impacts with pinpoint accuracy. Their technique involved treating interplanetary ballistics like orbital mechanics problems, rather than weapons delivery systems. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from NIGMA space. Put it through. The main screen showed the crystalline form of Supreme Analyticus Zenth 9. His optical arrays pulsed with what Admiral Vasquez recognized as distress patterns. Admiral Vasquez, I am requesting immediate diplomatic contact to discuss cessation of hostilities. Supreme Analyticus, you attacked our territory without provocation. Any diplomatic discussion will need to include terms for reparations and guarantees against future aggression. Admiral, our intelligence reports suggest human military mobilization has reached levels that threaten the stability of this entire galactic region. We are prepared to negotiate complete withdrawal from all disputed territories. Admiral Vasquez studied the alien leader's expression. Complete withdrawal? Yes, Admiral. Additionally, we are prepared to provide technological compensation for any damages caused by our exploratory operations. Exploratory operations? You attacked a civilian colony. Zenth 9's form pulsed rapidly. The attack was intended as a limited tactical assessment. We did not anticipate the scale of human response. What exactly did you expect? Our analytical models suggested localized defensive action, possibly escalating to regional military engagement. We did not predict civilization-wide mobilization at rates that appear to violate known laws of industrial logistics. Admiral Vasquez realized that the NIGMA Empire had made a fundamental error in understanding human psychology. They had treated the attack on New Harmony as a limited military probe. Humanity had treated it as the opening move in an existential war. Supreme Analyticus, what are your current intelligence estimates of human military capability? Admiral, our models are no longer able to provide meaningful assessments. Human behavior patterns appear to be specifically designed to invalidate analytical prediction systems. Let me help clarify the situation. In the 72 hours since your attack, human civilization has converted itself into a military-industrial complex, operating at maximum efficiency. We have developed weapons systems that didn't exist 3 days ago. We have deployed fleet formations that exceed our previous total naval capacity, and we have done all of this while maintaining normal civilian operations. Zenth 9's optical arrays dimmed. This level of rapid militarization should result in economic collapse and social instability. Under normal circumstances, yes. But humans don't operate under normal circumstances when we perceive an existential threat. We operate under crisis protocols that treat resource efficiency as a secondary concern. Explain crisis protocols. Admiral Vasquez considered how to explain human crisis response to a species that had never experienced it. When humans believe their survival is threatened, we stop following normal rules. Economic efficiency becomes irrelevant. Social hierarchy becomes irrelevant. Even physical limitations become suggestions, rather than absolute constraints. This suggests your species operates according to principles that defy rational analysis. Rational analysis assumes that preservation of existing systems is a primary goal. Humans are perfectly willing to destroy our existing systems if we think it will help us survive whatever is threatening us. The implications of this statement struck Zenth 9 like a physical blow. His analytical systems had always assumed that civilizations would prioritize preservation of their infrastructure, their social order, their economic stability. The idea of a species that would willingly sacrifice all of these things to achieve a single objective was beyond his understanding. Admiral, what would be required to terminate human offensive preparations? Honestly, I'm not sure we can terminate them at this point. You've triggered a response pattern that has its own momentum. Even if you withdrew completely from human space, The mobilization would probably continue until we were confident the threat was permanently eliminated. Define permanently eliminated. Admiral Vasquez chose her words carefully. Until we were certain that the NIGMA Empire would never. The NIGMA home system of Crystallos had never experienced direct military threat in its 3,000-year recorded history. As the most analytically advanced civilization in known space, they had always solved conflicts through superior planning, overwhelming technological advantage, and precise application of force at strategically optimal moments. Nothing in their experience had prepared them for what arrived at the edge of their system 18 days after the attack on New Harmony. Supreme Analyticus, Zenth 9 studied the sensor readings with disbelief that bordered on system malfunction. Tactical Coordinator, confirm long-range scanner data. Confirmed, Supreme Analyticus. We are detecting approximately 15,000 human vessels at the system perimeter. Configuration analysis suggests irregular fleet composition. Define irregular. Vex 7's crystalline form pulsed with confusion patterns. Supreme Analyticus, the human fleet appears to consist primarily of civilian vessels modified for military purposes. We are detecting cargo haulers equipped with kinetic projectile systems, passenger liners converted to troop transports, and what appears to be a luxury cruise ship broadcasting electronic warfare signals that are disrupting our communications across 17 different frequencies. 15,000 ships represents the entire human space fleet. Affirmative, Supreme Analyticus. Intelligence analysis suggests humanity has converted their entire spacefaring civilization to military configuration. Zenth 9 processed this information through his most advanced analytical matrices. The logical conclusion was impossible. No rational civilization would risk its entire space-based infrastructure on a single military operation. The economic and social cost would be catastrophic regardless of tactical outcome. Tactical Coordinator. Human fleet movements suggest what strategic objective? Unknown, Supreme Analyticus. Their formation patterns do not match any known military doctrine. They appear to be surrounding us. Clarify surrounding. The human fleet has deployed to positions that create a three-dimensional encirclement of our entire system. However, their positioning makes no tactical sense. Many vessels are stationed where they have no strategic value and cannot provide mutual support. What Vex 7 couldn't understand was that the human fleet wasn't positioned according to military doctrine. It was positioned according to a distributed problem-solving strategy that treated the NIGMA system like a complex engineering challenge rather than a military target. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as special advisor to the fleet commander, had suggested treating the engagement like a research project. Instead of concentrating force at key points, human ships were distributed to gather maximum information about NIGMA capabilities, infrastructure, and response patterns. Admiral Vasquez commanded the operation from the converted cruise ship Endless Summer, which had become the fleet's primary electronic warfare platform. The ship's former entertainment facilities had been converted into the most sophisticated signals intelligence operation in human history. Admiral, we're receiving communication attempts from the NIGMA home system, reported Commander Park. Put them through. Supreme Analyticus Zenth 9 appeared on the main screen, his crystalline form showing stress patterns that Admiral Vasquez had learned to recognize. Admiral Vasquez, human fleet deployment around our system constitutes an act of war against the NIGMA Empire. Supreme Analyticus, your attack on New Harmony constituted an act of war against the Terran Federation. We're responding proportionally. Admiral, the scale of your response exceeds the scope of our initial action by several orders of magnitude. From our perspective, you tested our defenses to assess our capabilities for future conquest. We're now testing your defenses to assess your capabilities for future threats. Zenth 9's analytical system struggled with this logic. Admiral, our action was limited tactical probe. We have no interest in conquering human territory. Supreme Analyticus, when someone attacks us to see how well we can defend ourselves, we assume they're planning something that will require us to defend ourselves. So we prefer to solve the problem before it becomes worse. Explain solve the problem. Admiral Vasquez chose her words carefully. We're going to make sure you never have the capability to threaten human civilization again. You are threatening complete destruction of NIGMA civilization? We're threatening comprehensive neutralization of NIGMA military capability. What happens to your civilization after that depends on how you respond to the neutralization process. The conversation was interrupted by alerts from both fleets. Human electronic warfare specialists had begun probing NIGMA communication networks, while NIGMA defensive systems were analyzing human fleet capabilities. What the NIGMA computers discovered defied their understanding of military logistics. The human fleet wasn't just larger than their models had predicted, it was more sophisticated. Civilian engineers had developed weapon systems that NIGMA analysts couldn't classify. Converted cargo ships carried kinetic bombardment systems that rivaled dedicated military vessels. Even small private spacecraft had been equipped with electronic warfare capabilities that seemed to anticipate NIGMA communication protocols. "Admiral," reported the human intelligence officer, "we're getting detailed scans of their home system. Their defensive installations are impressive, but they're designed according to predictable mathematical principles. Can we counter them? We've got 17 different teams working on solutions. The approach from the converted mining ship Lucky Strike looks particularly promising. They're treating the defensive grid like a ore extraction problem rather than a military target." Meanwhile, NIGMA tactical computers were struggling to analyze human fleet behavior. The ships moved in patterns that seemed random but achieved consistent results. Their communication systems used encryption that appeared to be based on cultural references rather than mathematical algorithms. Most disturbing, their tactical decisions seemed to be made by consensus among multiple commanders rather than centralized authority. "Supreme Analyticus," reported Defense Coordinator Keth 1, "human tactical behavior does not follow standard military doctrine. Their fleet appears to be making decisions through some form of distributed intelligence network." Explain distributed intelligence. Rather than centralized command structure, the humans appear to be operating as a collective problem-solving organism. Individual ships adapt their behavior based on real-time information sharing with the entire fleet. Zenth 9 realized that humanity had not just mobilized their space fleet, they had somehow converted their entire spacefaring population into a single, adaptive intelligence focused on solving the problem represented by NIGMA military capability. Defense Coordinator, recommend response to human fleet positioning. Supreme Analyticus, our analysis systems cannot provide meaningful recommendations. Human behavior patterns are specifically designed to invalidate predictive modeling. This was the moment Zenth 9 finally understood the true scope of their error. NIGMA civilization was built on analytical superiority. They conquered other species by understanding them better than they understood themselves. But humanity seemed to have evolved specifically to be unpredictable, adaptive and immune to analytical modeling. Admiral Vasquez. Zenth 9 broadcast. The NIGMA Empire requests immediate negotiations for comprehensive peace settlement. We're listening. Supreme Analyticus. We propose complete withdrawal from all territories within 100 light-years of human space, destruction of all military vessels capable of reaching human territory, and submission to ongoing human monitoring of NIGMA military development. Admiral Vasquez discussed these terms with her command staff through the distributed communication network that connected the entire human fleet. The response came not from her alone, but from the collective intelligence of 15,000 ships' crews. Supreme Analyticus, your terms are a starting point. However, our analysis suggests that as long as NIGMA civilization maintains its current technological and analytical capabilities, you will eventually develop new methods of threatening human territory. Admiral, you cannot be suggesting complete technological regression of our civilization. We're suggesting comprehensive restructuring of NIGMA civilization to ensure it never again poses a threat to human survival. The implications of this demand struck the NIGMA leadership like a physical blow. The humans weren't just seeking military victory. They were seeking permanent solution to the problem of NIGMA aggression. And their definition of permanent solution apparently included fundamental changes to NIGMA society. Technology and capabilities, Admiral. Such demands constitute requirements for cultural extinction. Supreme Analyticus, you chose to test our defensive capabilities. We responded by testing your offensive capabilities. Now we're implementing solutions to ensure this test never needs to be repeated. Over the following days, human teams throughout the fleet developed detailed proposals for NIGMA restructuring. The approach was comprehensive. NIGMA military technology would be limited to defensive systems unsuitable for offensive operations. Their expansion capabilities would be restricted to uninhabited systems.